Good afternoon, dear participants in this webinar that is organized by Tecnicelpa. Tecnicelpa is the Portuguese association or for the pulp and paper business. We have organized this webinar. So Tecnicelpa is 41 years old. During these years, we have organized 25 international conferences, including 600 scientific works. We have published 66 technical magazines, and per year we organize 4 to 6 training events that are demands from our members. In these conferences that we organize every second year, the idea is to share knowledge and also to create connections and friendship between our members. Those are the tasks. The magazines that we are publishing, they cover all areas, or we pretend to cover all areas related with forest, pulp and paper business, and also other related issues with the area. In what concerns the training that we organize, so we try also to cover the pulp process, the paper process, the tissue, and also the forest, and also some activities that are becoming more and more important for our business, that is main health and safety. Today we are here in this innovation webinar. The idea is to help our business, our sector, our industrial sector, and our members to increase their knowledge about what is the business doing in what concerns innovation. The chairman of today's session is Gabriel Sousa. And before passing the word to Gabriel, I would like to introduce Gabriel. Gabriel is the Executive Director of Innovation and Technological Development at Alti Group since 2018. He is responsible for coordinating all innovation, research and development activities for Alti Group pulp mills. He has over 18 years of experience on forest pulp and paper, with focus in innovation, technology, operational development, and also consulting. Before he joined Alti, he has been working for AFRI, for former POIRI, and also in the research area in Portugal. So let's go for the innovation talks. Let's give the word to Gabriel. Gabriel, please take care and good luck, and for the participants, enjoy the event, and thank you very much.
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Vitor, for the kind introduction. I hope I'm live now. It's been some small delays related to some IT issues. I'm glad that we are in an innovation seminar, and of course, IT issues is always an issue when I talk about innovation. So the idea here is really to have a talk about innovation, and I think that the program is quite wide, and it will tackle several aspects of the forest-based industry. And today's session is more focused on trends of innovation and also some policies of innovation. And this is a challenging topic to address in a short amount of time. And but I'm lucky enough to be a range of panel, and we have 4 entities here to talk. And we will start with the National Agency of Innovation in Portugal. We also have CELPA, which is the Portuguese Pulp and Paper Association. We have Centro, which is the Center for Pine Industry Association. And finally, we will have the European Confederation of Paper Industries, which will give us a more broad perspective into the pulp and paper aspects of innovation and policies. So the way that we're going to address this is that all the speakers will have a 15-minute introduction and presentation about their views on innovation, their entities that they're representing. So I encourage you to watch the presentations and encourage you to post some questions in the chat room. After the 4 presentations will be done and over, we will then resume a Q&A session where I'll be moderating and asking questions to these participants. So having putting outset of the rules of the moderation, I now will introduce the first speaker, and I'm glad to be joined by Alexandre Almeida. So Alexandre Almeida is here representing the National Innovation Agency of Portugal, and Alexandre holds a PhD in Innovation Economics. He's in charge of National Smart Specialization Strategy Coordinating Council and a National Strategy for Technology Innovation. He previously has worked also on Smart Specialization Strategy for the north of the country and also south of the country. And he has worked in different other roles, including being a head advisor for the Regional Development Unit and head advisor for the Management Authority of the Regional Operation Program. So let's hear about National Agency of Innovation in Portugal, and let's hear Alexandre, and please make your questions in the chat room. And Alexandre, welcome. We don't have Alexandre online, so let's skip into the European perspective on pulp and paper industry. So we have here Jory Ringsman from CEPI. So CEPI is the European Confederation for the Paper Industries, and he's the Director General of CEPI, and he previously was Deputy Director General and responsible for issues relating sustainability, environment, and consumer protection. Prior to CEPI, he was also civil servant in the European Commission and a political advisor in the European Parliament. So we have the pleasure to have here Jory with us, and he will give us a very nice introduction about CEPI, his views on innovation, his views on the trends and policies, and hopefully you can watch it and we can ask some questions on chat room, so for me to moderate the discussion. So Jory, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes. So as it was said, my name is Jory Ringsman, and in my role as Director General of CEPI, I'm constantly impressed by the innovation capabilities of this sector. And in the following short talk, I will explain how I see the innovation of our sector being supported by the trends and accelerated by policy, the very ambitious European policy. So indeed, I will have 2 main parts, one on the trends and the other one on the policy. But before that, let me introduce you to CEPI. We are representing the European pulp and paper industry here in Brussels, and it is both an honor to work for such a responsible role model industry and exciting as the sector is becoming an increasingly diverse player in circular bioeconomy. We have 500 companies in Europe, operating 900 sites in Europe, and including 139 biorefineries. And I like to say that those are innovation hubs of the future. People may not know it, but we really are holding an answer to multiple and most societal questions and are aligned with the key trends. If you look at sustainability, we are champions in circularity, but we are based on renewable materials and to a large extent also renewable energy. We are very much advancing in green chemistry. We are the first pioneers of responsible sourcing. And of course, many of the companies are very much advanced in carbon neutrality as well. We offer solutions for plastic fossil substitution, but also one of the big problems of Europe is that in a shrinking power of this continent in the global competition for resources, we are lacking access to raw materials and there's scarcity of raw materials. But in our sector, we can offer domestic supply of sustainable raw materials, and we are very much an industry made in Europe. We are sourced in Europe, manufactured in Europe, recycled in Europe with European technology, and actually we also are very much based on European energy as well. But this is not only just the rosy picture. We can see the economic transition and the future, if you look far enough, will emerge where we'll certainly have a role to play. But the transitioning to that nice, beautiful future may not be comfortable. We may experience a period in between where good ideas, great innovations, and otherwise perfectly sustainable companies may not survive as the new is not born yet, to follow this sentence by Antonio Gramsci. We also may fall victim of such morbid symptoms of the old economy dying before we get to the new. Well, then it's actually good to know that the policy is going to accelerate this change. So this in-between time will become shorter, hopefully, with the policy. When this lady, who's the president of the European Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, when she introduced the European Green Deal, she called it the Europe's man on the moon moment. And I can only understand it as a reference to aiming to historically high ambition. So she's aiming to do something that was just a short while ago considered to be impossible to achieve. Well, how is she going to do it? She's introducing kind of omni policy, which is a huge package of policy initiatives and legislative proposals in one huge package, moving very high speed. And this way, she has almost invented like a steamroller that is unstoppable. And this is the way that the policy is accelerating the change. The Commission itself calls it a set of deeply transformative policies. And indeed, it will impact all areas of economic activity. It will change the way the Europeans will live, what we will eat, what we will wear, how we will shop, and how we will move. But the other side of the same coin is, of course, that it will equally be deeply transformative for how all this will be produced, distributed, and transported across the continent. And this change is expected to be deep and fast. Plus, we know from the past that businesses will anticipate the policy change. So they will start already before the legislative processes are finished in short time. They will start already moving towards substituting fossil materials and fossil energy with renewable ones. They will start discarding linear business models and move to circular ones. And they will get active along the entire value chain, identifying which are the most sustainable ones that they can work with. And again, then innovations in this sector and this sector already as we have it will be a big part of the answer. We have never faced in this sector so many challenges, but also so many opportunities at the same time. It really is now that the history will be made and the decisions are made about the future. But I'm convinced that this is a business ecosystem of the future. The long-term trends are on our side, supporting us. The policy will accelerate the change that is needed, and it's happening now. And the industry is proactive and investing to make things happen. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Jory, for a very nice presentation, introduction to CEPI and to CEPI's views. I think they're very interesting and very synthetic way to show some of the trends that are defining the industry and defining the overall economy. So let's move ahead, and I'll go back then to the first speaker. So let's go to Alexandre Almeida, and let's go back to Francisco Gomes da Silva, and maybe making a sequence for the pulp and paper sector. So we've heard CEPI from European perspective. Now we'll be looking at CELPA perspective, which will be also a perspective held here at Portugal, but of course with the influence of what's happening on the outside world. So let me introduce Francisco Gomes da Silva. So he's the General Director for CELPA. He's doctorate in agronomy and postgraduate in business sciences. He's also graduated in agronomic engineering. And of course, he's now the General Director of CELPA, which is the Association of Pulp and Paper Sector in Portugal. He's also a professor at ISA, the institute here in Portugal since '87. And he's also founding partner of Agrogés and member of the management board of Casa Agrícola de Quinta da Foz, and administrator of Sociedade Agrícola da Faial. He was Secretary of State of Forest and Rural Development, and also advisor to the Ministry of Agriculture Office in 2011 and 2012. So it's a pleasure for me to have here Francisco. And Francisco, the floor is yours. Looking forward to hear your presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, Gabriel. I hope everybody can hear me and see the presentation that is on. I would like to start thanking Tecnicelpa for the invitation, for being here, and say hello to everyone that is following us in the moment that will follow later on. Basically, I'll try to spend 10 minutes trying to present you the innovation context for pulp and paper industry, following three main steps. So looking for the main drivers that are driving the most recent innovation, looking to the political context, and in the end, just a screening on the fields of innovation that are going on. So when talking about the main drivers that are driving the recent innovation in the sector, I would like to highlight three of them. The first of all, the call that has been made to the pulp and paper industry to contribute to the climate transition. That's a universal call, of course, but the pulp and paper industry all over the world and in Europe and in Portugal have heard that call. So basically that will happen through an effective reduction of greenhouse gases emission by the industry, processes innovation, the improvement on forestry sustainable technologies by increasing net CO2 sequestration, also processes innovations, and through the effective substitution of fossil-based materials or products by forest and cellulosic-based ones. So innovation in terms of products. The second main drive, I would say, it's the urgent need of a bio-based reindustrialization process in Europe and also in Portugal, aligned with the Industry 4.0 principles. So we need to improve the substitution of fossil energy for renewable energy, such as biomass-based solution. We need their market improvements. We will do that by improving the efficiency levels of water and energy use through processes innovation. And also in order to improve the quality of treated effluents and by the reduction of volumes dropped into nature through processes innovation. And in the end, the challenge we have to improve as a society, the circularity of pulp and paper value chains. We will try to do that through a more effective industrial residue recovery and by the improvement of recycling levels of paper and cardboard final products. The political context, we all know that the industry is facing a very aggressive political context, both at national and European level, mainly due to the legislative proposals around the European Green Deal and the intermediate 2030 targets that were delivered through the Fit for 55 package in a set of legislative proposals that are needed in one hand, but in the other hand, they are pushing the industry through a very accelerated process of innovation and very demanding on investment, of course. Some challenges within the Green Deal and on this political context are showing a lack of understanding about the reality. That's our opinion as the industry association. Namely, they are lacking of understanding whether or not there are technologies available on the market to answer some of the requests. If the investment cycles, they're missing the knowledge about the investment cycles in each different sector of the economy. So namely, when trying to find out solutions that would fit all the situations, that is almost impossible. And the financing instruments needed to implement some of the desired changes. Those financing instruments are not available yet, and they should be in order to all of us to succeed in these changes. In the other hand, some of the policy instruments are in conflict with part of the objectives proposed. I would say that it is normal that it happens once it's a very large number of proposals, but those conflicts should be taken care and should be removed through the process of discussion on the proposed diplomas. For instance, the new EU strategy for the forests, as it was presented, clearly conflicts with the improvement, the need to improve of large-scale circularity within forest-based industries. Of course, there are opportunities, but we have to make choices. It is not possible to have all the good in that we would like to. We have to make some choices. There's also conflicts in a very erratic policies to support the production and consumption of biogases in substituting natural gas to drive the transition until hydrogen is available. And finally, the proposal of excluding from the EU emission trading system plants where biomass emissions are more than 95% of total greenhouse gases emissions. It doesn't make sense, and it will be an obstacle that should be removed. So to finalize this short presentation, I would like to, just show a little bit where the innovation is going through in the pulp and paper sector. The drivers are the ones that I've referred in the beginning. We can look in zoom in vision, decomposing it in 5 directions or main axes, like the need of reduction of carbon fossil emissions, the new materials and products that are being developed, the energy efficiency and electrification of energy consumptions also ongoing in the industries, the need of the circular bioeconomy that are pushing some innovation processes, and the renewable non-fossil gases and hydrogen change that is also demanding several innovations. And just to finalize and not just to show a little bit of some of the new innovation processes that our industry is going through. The decarbonization process that is, mainly across all the economy. Also the combining of hydrogen and biogenic CO2 as a path to substitute fossil fuel in planes, ships and trucks. And all of course, the ongoing substitution of plastic packaging that is already reality. The circularity that we are improving when trying to the declassification of byproducts from our industries and finding out new alternative uses as raw materials in other economic activities. And then a wide range of new bioproducts that can be, and some of them are now being produced from wood celluloses, most of them anyway, still needing R&D activities and still needing financing to be developed and to be available for the economy. So that was basically what I would like to do, to tell you, to show you, and mainly just 2 last slides to see some of the path that pulp and paper industries have been making in what concerns some of environmental indicators. We have reduced 72% in Portugal of water used since per ton of final product since 1990. It's quite a path that we have made through. And then as I stressed before, just to the last slide, to state that the pulp and paper industry are privileged domains for circularity of our economy and should not be left beside. So thank you. I hope I've passed the message within the time available.
So thank you, Francisco, for a very nice presentation, and to show us also your views about the trends, macro trends that you're experiencing, some of the challenges that our industry is facing, and some of the paradox between the challenges and the policies. And we'll come to that in the Q&A session. And talking about the Q&A session, I'll talk with the participants that are watching this conference. Please make your questions, drop your notes and questions to the chat, because some of those notes and questions will be used later on for the Q&A session. Having said that, it's time to go through the next speaker. So finally, we can all hear Alexandre from the National Agency of Innovation in Portugal. I tried to introduce him twice. Now I think is the time for him. So Alexandre, welcome. So Alexandre, like I said, has a PhD in Innovation Economics. He works now for the National Innovation Agency and being in charge with National Smart Specialization Strategy, Coordinating Council, and a National Strategy for Technology Innovation. He has in the past some other roles in a sparse specialization strategy for different regions in Portugal. And he's also worked for Regional Development Unit and head of advisor for the Management Authority of the Regional Operational Program. So Alexandre, also glad to welcome you and looking forward for your presentation.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you all for watching. First of all, good afternoon. This is a very interesting topic, especially in the context that we are at this moment. We are facing challenges, unprecedented challenges in terms of sustainability and how to match sustainability and competitiveness that in the past was somehow detached. Now we are trying to find a new growth path that joins innovation and sustainability as pivots of competitiveness. And alongside it, we have been working in terms of devising the new smart specialization strategy that identifies the priorities for the next 10 years in Portugal and how we envision the transformative actions in order to make this happen. What we see with Green Deal and what we see with digitalization, we see that although the principles are obviously great, we still have a long way to go in order to make it concrete and available in real life. And this is a little bit what I'll be discussing and providing a preview of. I will start with something that is about Portugal, but it actually also links well with the presentation of Francisco. We have the productivity paradox in Portugal. We have been evolving in terms of innovation to an extent that before this final European Innovation Scoreboard, where the methodology changed and the results also changed a little bit. The previous one demonstrated a huge progress of Portugal in terms of innovation indicators in an asymmetric way, mostly from the scientific and human capital perspective, less from companies. But these results are even more staggering when you see that Portugal has three regions in green, which are the most advanced ones, the lighter green, the least advanced in the most advanced group, whereas Spain had none and only Italy had one small region in the northern part. So we have been investing significantly in innovation, and we have been tackling innovation and somehow neglecting the issue on sustainability, or at least not considering the issue of sustainability. But when we are doing this type of work, we notice that sustainability, the climate change is actually really happening. Algarve, that most of you know for its touristical specialization, reached the year of December of 2019 with 4% of water reserves. So this means that the climate changes are actually happening and are right now at our doorstep. And when we look at how we define a growth path for the upcoming years, we need to understand how to take advantage of the industries that have been the backbone in Portugal. And the pulp and paper industry is one of such examples, one of the industries that is most capital intensive and with greater propensity to export. And so how we can sustain this? So we usually conceive a model that has where sustainable competitiveness covers the three P's. We need to find a way of making people, the planet, happy, and then regenerate profits. So when we are introducing Green Deal and we are trying to stimulate companies to take on a different path in the way they produce, as Francisco was demonstrating in the reduction of the water consumption, it needs to be about improving operation, and this means higher profit and greater efficiency, but also in terms of understanding that the quality of life and the sustainability of the planet are actually key elements in the long-term competitiveness. We have been neglecting the planet and also our well-being And this is what provides us a distorted vision of how profitable operations are. And when we look at sustainable competitiveness, we find 5 pillars. One about governance, and you'll see that governance and resources management are key issues in the Portuguese landscape, both from political and also from the natural perspective. We have been dealing with difficulties in terms of the management of the forest, the management of the land, the property, and so how we conceive a system that can actually protect the forest and make a better and more valuable use out of the resources it gives us. And so trying to create an ecosystem that with pulp and paper, but beyond it, can multiply the sources of income and increase the value added. Then you have human capital for sure. We need to increase the amount of people and the knowledge accumulation in biotech and in green biotech and how we can devise new problems and new opportunities to serve the market and natural resources and social capital in the sense that sustainability is today a broader term and a broader spectrum in terms of the industry. So when we look at the forest industry in itself and we look at the national context, unreadable, I know, but this is a network analysis, and you'll see that the forest is on the bottom left corner, which means that this analysis demonstrates how the different sectors interconnect in innovation. And so what we see is that the value chain of forest is highly concentrated in this pulp and paper industry, but we need to find ways of taking advantage of new opportunities to innovate. As Francisco also told, much of the time we focus our energies in efficiency, making the same or more with less. And so we are looking at productivity or at the creation of value from the denominator side. We need also to look at forest as an opportunity to create novel products and the taking out of plastic from our lives, the new probiotics that appear in the health and the food industry. Those are areas where the forest and this industry can have a saying, and the cluster around the forest economy can extend itself to other areas and to creation of new products, including products for construction, because also the recovery of materials would be much easier based on the forest product than in current construction products made of concrete. So this is a statistical analysis that provides an overview. We'll see the same for the sea economy, and you'll see that to a certain extent, the specialization areas in the previous smart specialization strategy that were quite intensive in natural resources have a significant difficulty into connecting with other sectors and other areas of economic expertise. And since innovation is increasingly a complex and multidimensional process, we need to find ways of bridging these gaps and introducing more innovation into the forest industry. So, and I will be presenting you and on first hand what we've been working in terms of the transformative actions for 2030. The new smart specialization strategy will cover 6 topics. The previous one had an architecture of 15 priorities, a more vertical architecture. We changed it and we evolved to a more horizontal that somehow is not only aligned with the priorities of European Union, but also with the need of an actual transformation in the way we do business, in the way we develop our own companies, and we create an ecosystem that is prone to innovation. And when we mention circularity, this is a great example of green transition, but it's also a great example of how complex it is to make it. It's important to identify which type of byproducts exist, the amount where they are, and how we can find opportunities and technological opportunities to reconvert them and create a sustainable bioeconomy with different applications based upon a set of industries that have the greater propensity to circularity, where forestry is actually one of the most hot topics. A second level and a second transformative action has to do with the adaptation to climate change. And so we need to find new models that guarantee the sustainability on how we explore the land. So we need to find ways of recovering the land or in creating and sustaining ecosystems beyond an intensive approach, or at least within an intensive approach, but in a balanced way that somehow the negative impacts are compensated by the positive impact. And so creating a little bit the trend that the industry, as Francisco demonstrated to you, is the following: to reduce the impact of the process in itself, but also to think on how new products can be conceived. How can we use the pulp and paper industry, and how can we use the forest industry in a broader sense to respond to these challenges that we are facing in terms of climate change and creating new construction sites, new construction materials, new materials for textiles, etc., fibers. A third level regarding decarbonized industrial production, which is about what you were mentioning, reducing the footprint of how we produce these goods and products. Uh, we will have dedicated actions, which are then specific per area or per topic sector, if you prefer, meant to reduce the intensity, the carbon intensity of production, the intensity in energy consumption of these productions, and so have a more environmentally conscious and responsible industry. Let me say that Portugal is among the 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 higher in the rank of the GDP intensity, which means that in order for us to produce €1 of value, we actually consume a lot of energy. So industry as a whole, and again, in capital intensive industries like the pulp and paper, uh, saving energy is a major concern and a major lever for future competitiveness. And the Green Deal is also highlighting not only this importance, not only the potentialities of finding other topics of innovation, crossing innovation across the different sectors, but also highlighting that the world is changing and the world will benefit the ones that are sustainable and will eventually punish, including through carbon taxes, the ones that have a higher intensity in the carbon footprint. So this is a change that we need. Then you'll find three other topics that in some sense are also relevant, not only the decarbonization of cities and territories, but especially, for instance, the management of water and energy. These are two topics that we'll focus on. How we manage energy, and energy is something that is easily valuable by people and industry because it's expensive, but water has been neglected for a long term because it's relatively inexpensive. And so, although the pulp and paper have been demonstrating their constant in reducing the water consumption, this is something that we need to improve. And finally, in terms of what is called energy storage, and again, taking stock on Francisco's presentation, we need to find other solutions. Forest products are renewable by definition, and the energy produced from biomass is renewable by definition. We need to make it cleaner, we need to make it more efficient, but still can be an interesting solution, especially when we are closing the thermal power stations that use fuel or charcoal. So we have also another priority. As I told you, we have six. We have two that are more targeted to the areas that interest you the most today, and the other one is on great natural assets, which cover forest, ocean, and space. It actually acknowledges that there are certain resources that are territorial, that are relevant because of their expression and their economic potential, but need a new strategy in terms of the management of those resources and the creation of a strategy to innovate based upon them. And so we highlight the Earth observation technologies and the use of satellites, which will be much more democratical in the future and favorable to the use of apps and new ecosystem of technology, digital technologies, to monitor the evolution of forests how plagues spread out, how the forest is being managed, how the fire actually happen, and try to have a better management of these resources where forest and forest products are very important. And the second topic that I highlight is regarding the idea about creating value. We've been talking a lot of green biotech, but in this area, the pulp and paper is actually a very important industry, an example in terms of capacity to innovate. But we also need this industry to open up and to probably stimulate the symbiotic development of other economic activities, or at least foster the promotion of other areas of innovation within the forest ecosystem. This is pretty much it, what I wanted to present to you. We can also discuss things like the political instruments and also the financial opportunities in the upcoming programming cycle. But I think this is something I can leave for questions and answers. Thank you.
Okay, Alexandre, thank you for a very nice presentation as well. Good, nice overview about the priorities and transformation opportunities in general, but also specifically for the forest-based industries as our pulp and paper industry and other forest-based industries. So final presentation is from Centro PINUS, so for the Association for the Pine Industry in Portugal, and we are glad to have Susana Carneiro. Susana Carneiro, she's the technical director of Centro PINUS since 2005. She's a multi-stakeholder nonprofit organization promoting maritime pine forestry. One of her roles is monitoring forest policy. She's also an interface between R&D institutions and forest stakeholders and has experience developing research agendas and dissemination. Susana is a forester with a master's degree in applied ecology, and she's also a lecturer at the Polytechnic Institute of Viana do Castelo. So Susana, welcome to our panel, and looking forward to hear your presentation.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Gabriel. Good afternoon to all of you. I would like to start by thanking our host, Tecnicelpa, for organizing, promoting this interesting cycle, the Innovation Talks, and also for inviting Centro PINUS to make this presentation about setting the trends and policies for the pine-based cluster. So in this presentation, and now my slide is not running. Any suggestions? Can you see my presentation?
You have to click on the slide first, and then it starts taking the action from you.
Okay. Now I'm pressing the escape key, but nothing is happening. Oh. So in this presentation, I will be briefly presenting Centro PINUS because some of you may not know us, and basically characterizing the context for this cluster. Then I will be briefly going through the main policy trends, and finally, what are the key challenges for innovation. So Centro PINUS is a non-profit association. We were created in 1999, and our main goal is improve maritime pine forest production and productivity according to industry needs. So we act by gathering information and data about this cluster. We try to influence policies. We participate in stakeholders forum, technical committees, and we have an intense communication activity directed to forestry stakeholders, but also to society. Regarding research and development, we participate in projects typically in the dissemination results stage, but also we try to influence the research agenda. We currently have 28 members, and they include the Contractors Association, the Forest Landowners Associations, industry, where we have representatives of all the subsectors that are in the pine cluster, then research, finance, and some public services. So now let's go into the context for this cluster. So maritime pine is a native tree. It is a pioneer resilient species, and this means it is able to thrive in poor, eroded soils while creating value in a multifunctional way. So we are able to produce wood, resin, while providing ecosystem services. This also makes us a relevant species in the context of forest restoration and ecosystem restoration, because typically restoration starts by a pioneer species like maritime pine, and we don't have that much species that can play the ecologic role that maritime pine can play in the Portuguese forest. So we are currently the third species in area in Portugal. We have currently 714,000 hectares. We lost 27% of the area since 1995, but we are still the biggest carbon sink according to the later National Forest Inventory. Forest fire is the biggest threat and decline cause. Our stands are mostly semi-natural or with very low intensity in forest management and in small private holdings. Of course, about 80% of the stands are in communal or public lands that are an important reserve for the stock. Most of the landscape units are rather small. Almost 70% are under 7 hectares. So this is a small scale species. We have a high percentage of young stands. This is mostly due to forest fire, and most of the stands are uneven aged. Understocked and overstocked stands are common, and all this information means that we don't have that much active management, and the productivity could actually increase a lot with just a few minor actions. Now let's take a look at the wood manufacturing sites. They are present in all the country, as you can see, but mostly the north and center. And we have over 300 wood transformation sites. Sawmills are, of course, the biggest number. We have 249 sawmills. We have wood preservation sites, packaging paper, wood panels, and energy. And in energy, the wood pellets are the main actors. So this is a rather complex and diverse landscape. We have both big actors that are in the forefront of innovation, and we also have small family businesses. Now let's take a look at the wood consumption. So in 2020, the wood consumption was about 4 million cubic meters. This is roughly the average. So even though we had a reduction of 9%, compared to 2019, this was in the normal range of variation for the pine sector. So the sector was quite resilient to the pandemic. Sawmills are also the main wood consumer. They represented in 2020 39% of the wood consumption, but as you can see, bioenergy sector was already the second sector, and only then, after bioenergy, we have pulp and paper and wood-based panels. This means, and this is the bad news, we have a severe wood deficit. And in 2020, we estimated that wood deficit represented 57% of the 2020 consumption. So this is a huge threat to this cluster. Now let's take a look at the main policy trends. Of course, the Green Deal and the new EU forest strategy are key trends. I selected as an example the revised regulation on land use change and forestry. And as you can see, 4 out of 6 of the policy orientations are closely related to the forestry sector. So improving the resilience of forests to climate change, an ambitious target to increase carbon stored in soils and forests. And I would like to select to drive your attention to the increasing the wood of the use of long-lasting wood, and because pine cluster is closely associated with products that have a long life cycle. So this is a huge opportunity for conifers and also for the pine sector. This is, of course, also related to the new European Bauhaus, where the construction sector is supposed to be turned from a carbon source into a carbon sink. And this, of course, it is achieved with an increased use of wood in the construction sector. And this calls for a lot of innovation in architecture and in green design, and it is an interesting opportunity for this cluster. Because of these policy trends, it is expected a high increase in wood demand. So demand for housing and from growing economies should ensure a strong consumption of forest products through the decade. And this is the case also here in Portugal. We have an increased demand and we have an increased difficulty in sourcing wood. A positive outlook, it is that we are facing an increase in the respect for the cascading use of wood, where bioenergy is at the end of the chain, because as I showed previously, in Portugal currently about 1/3 of the wood is directly introduced to the bioenergy sector. Another important key trend is bioeconomy. And as an example, the Portuguese Recovery and Resilience Plan, it identifies pine resin as one of key 3 sectors. So we have textile, shoe industry, and pine resin. Also, we have an ambitious plan to transform the landscape, and there are key projects that are being set in place that are very important to reduce actual fire risk, but also the perception, because typically the risk perception is even more deterrable than the actual risk. In the picture, you can see a ceremony of the current Environment Minister with the resin stakeholders. And for the pine, for the Environment Minister, he sees pine mostly as a carbon sink. And so he's hoping that if it is interesting to resin, to extract, to tapping the pines, hopefully we will have a longer production cycle and increase the carbon sink. And this leads me to some of the key challenges that we are facing. And this is how can we reconcile societal needs for wood and non-wood products while enhancing ecosystem services? What are the trade-offs and how can we manage them? How forest management needs to be adapted? How can we make forest management more flexible? So how are we going to pull this out to for the pine forest? How are we going to produce enough wood for the construction sector, for the packaging sector, for the bioeconomy, while increasing the carbon sink and keeping biodiversity? This is a truly difficult challenge. And of course, a key factor in all of this is society. How can we engage society with forests and the forestry sector? Are we communicating effectively? Are we ready to change behaviors? Because this is all about changing behaviors in the end, including our own. Do we have the right tools to promote these changes? And I believe these are the key questions that innovation need to address in the following years. So thank you very much for your attention. I would like to invite you to follow us on social media, visit our website, and I will be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. Back to you, Gabriel.
So thank you, Susana, for also a very nice presentation, a very nice overview about the pine sector here in Portugal and all the challenges ahead, not only I would say for the pine industry, but also for the other forest-based industries in Portugal. And we know that most of them there are common, so
Yes.
we're on common grounds.
Yeah.
So now what will follow next is we'll be joining the other panel members. I can see that we have everybody here. And again, everyone watching, please build your discussion. But I think we all agree that we are living very uncertain times. There isn't even now a word for it, which is called VUCA, so which means a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And on top of that, we have all these trends. I mean, the ones that you've showed there are some of the trends that I also myself identify. Talk about reindustrialization, decarbonization, climate change, demographics, sustainability, digitalization, and so on and so forth. So my first question is a bit general, but bear with me, and I'll probably start with Jory. Nice to have the European perspective, but taking all this into consideration, this VUCA world that we're living on, and all these macro trends that we are experiencing, is the pulp and paper sector in Europe prepared to tackle them? And if not, what still needs to be done within the organizations of the forest-based industries and, of course, pulp and paper sector in particular to overcome them?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I like the reference to the VUCA world, because I think that's one of the biggest problems that we might have in being successful, because in this uncertainty, what people tend to do is not to embrace the future or the new or the unknown, but they embrace rather the things they know from the past, to feel secure and safe, which is quite understandable. But I think that is really then drawing us to the old instead of jumping to the future. And this is the first problem. So people may not be ready for the innovations and the new ideas or new products, new businesses that we are proposing from our sector. Second big problem is that even if we now identify the needs of the society quite precisely, the innovation pipeline is really long. So typically you are not anywhere near the market before 10 years from now if you now start the project. So that's a long time to wait, and then it's a long time before you start generating any revenues, and meanwhile you need to of course survive the 10 years time in the waiting for the pipeline to mature the innovation. And in general, I think even if we fully embrace these very noble goals of the Green Deal or the policies, be it on national level or on European level, we fully agree with these goals to get to the carbon neutral society by 2050 or the Fit for 55 situation of 2030. We still don't know actually how to survive the first 10 years because we don't have yet the access to affordable clean energy. We are not even sure about the availability of the raw materials that we have here in Europe because the policies might be driving in another direction and limiting the access to wood, even if we are telling people that we know how to manage it in a sustainable way. By the way, the word sustainability, everybody's now talking about it, but it's an old forestry term from over 300 years ago, meaning that you have to harvest less than you grow. And of course, in these 300 years that we have been practicing, and we still practice sustainability in the forestry, we have of course added other parameters, not only the quantity, but also the quality of the forest. But despite that, we might still be challenged in getting the access to the raw material. So I think we have many challenging points in getting there, but still, of course, I would like to be optimistic and believe that we have chances in surviving this.
So thanks, Jory, for your comments on that. Well, same question to maybe now with a more Portuguese perspective on the pulp and paper. Francisco, do you see that our industry here faces the same challenges and we have the same issues addressing these uncertain and macro trends that we've just described? Or are we in a better position that the most or the average to tackle them?
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. I would not say that we are in a better position. Anyway, our industry is doing their jobs on both runways. We should consider that the industries, in one hand, they have to face the present, so they have to produce, they have to sell, they have to relate with the market and with the stakeholders that are now existing. And at the same time, the industries do need to face the challenges that are now on the table, like Jory was saying. So from what I know from our industries, from the pulp and paper sector, all of them are really committed, not only with the objectives of the Green Deal and the carbon, the decarbonization of our economy and so on. They are really committed, and they are not only committed, but they are doing their job also on that runway to the future. Let's say. I think that in Portugal we have a specific characteristic. As always in Portugal, we are always specific. But when we look to our forest, because it is very driven by our natural conditions that are different from Sweden or from Finland or from England or any other country. And there we have a huge challenge. We have it in the pine forest, as we have it in the eucalyptus forest or in any other type of forests. And there is our main concern, because most I don't know if it is most of the politicians or most of the society take the forests for granted, as they have a perspective about our forests that is, and it is normal to do so, a little decoupled from the reality that exists in the field. And when I focused on the new European forest strategy, is because when you look at that important strategy for Europe, it is very hard to find there the forests where that strategy have to be applied to. And this is our main concern. When you are designing a strategy, interesting strategy with objectives and axes of development that we all agreed with. But the thing is, if it is not applicable to what exists in the reality, then in the end we'll be frustrated because we had a good strategy, but it didn't work out. In that aspect, I would like always to remember what Churchill used to say about the good strategies that we may have, but and that we may be involved in designing those good strategies. But we should, whenever we have time, we should look to the reality and try to find out if those strategies are can be used to transform our reality. So that's our main concern when talking about the industry facing these challenges. But like Jory said, we are committed on decarbonization, on achieving all the goals that are being proposed. From the side of the Portuguese pulp and paper industry, the commitment is total.
Okay, thank you, Francisco, for your words. I think that strategy, like you said, is one thing. Then walking the talk is another, and we know that there's some barriers to overcome. But I'm sure that the sector is fully committed to tackle those challenges. So, looking into the pine sector, Susana also mentioned clearly the challenges, some of the challenges, but of course, the pine sector in Portugal is a bit more probably, I would say, asymmetric in terms of the stakeholders, because of course we have quite different sectors there representing, like the sawmilling, the wood panels, the bioenergy, and there can be wide range of companies from small to larger ones, and of course that can also be a challenge on its own. So how you see the sector prepared to tackle these complex questions in a local manner, but also looking at the global perspective?
Well, this diversity that characterizes the pine cluster, I think it has worked as an advantage, because it works as a complex ecosystem. They are deeply interconnected, and somehow they have been able to balance each other. Of course, any system has its limits, and unfortunately, we are going to be facing some smaller industries with more traditional technologies to shut down, because, for instance, currently there is really a very high wood deficit, and smaller companies are facing a shutdown. But I imagine the ones that are going to stay in business will be enough to take the cluster into a different sector, because this is a cluster that has been facing this complexity and difficulties for 3 decades now. It has been increasingly the complexity, and somehow it has been able to adapt and innovate. It has been able, for instance, to increase the use of wood, recycled wood, and recycled paper. They keep, I think they keep surprising themselves on how they can adapt. So I have a positive outlook based on our history, even though, unfortunately, we are going to lose some smaller stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that is a good point as well. The transition, I think that we always have, some companies that will be left behind.
Yeah.
Adaptation is everything, and we know that evolution takes its toll in some entities. So Alexandre, I think that will also be interesting to hear more helicopter view from someone that is managing innovation programs with different companies and even different sectors. How do you see this huge complexity and uncertainty in relation to what companies are currently doing? Do you believe that the companies that you're typically in contact with, they are prepared already, or do you still think, and you mentioned a good point towards the pulp and paper sector in the sense that we need to be more open to other industries, to cross industries, and to make sure that we have that open platform with different sectors. So how do you see the overall companies and overall sectors in general in terms of tackling these complex issues?
Well, I would say that if COVID has demonstrated one thing, is that we are severely unprepared to any type of disruption. What we observe is that even in digital, our idea of digitalization was a relatively poor one. And now we are trying to catch up in a speedy way, not necessarily a bad way. But I will go back a little bit, saying that, and picking some of your words, we are very good at devising strategies, but when we reach the area of forest, that's an issue. It's a problematic issue because there's regulations that make this harder. There's a property dispersion in Portugal that makes every type of management and intervention harder. There's some kind of schizophrenia from the government that we want private sector to resolve areas which are semi-public or public, when without public money that will not happen. And there is an imbalance in this cluster, which is the predominance of pulp and paper is clear, and the logic and the evolution of the industry has been staggering, but the rest of the areas, like Susana mentioned, suffer severely. We are entering a new stage of development where all industries, including this one, face two big challenges: the transition in digital and the transition into sustainability. And I would say that we will add a third challenge that is coming up very fast, but we neglect it, which is the transition to talent. We will have issues in attracting people to work on industry because it's not sexy, it's dirty, it's whatever. But the fact is, we will have issues on getting people working in this area, on retaining talent, because the perception that people have is that this is a traditional area, not interesting, and so not creative, with little potential for an evolution, not in the career sense, but the new generations are not so focused on the logic of the career and evolving in terms of salaries, but evolving in a broader context or in a different multidimensional. But coming back to the other two topics, the green transition that we are faced upon are actually very severe, are being underestimated. Because if the climate change affects, as it is foreseen, for instance, the southern part of Portugal, a big part of the forest that is in the upper Alentejo will probably disappear or suffer a severe transformation. And the industries that work on these areas and across the industries there is a major challenge on how to readjust the logics of functioning to a real sustainability paradigm. Sustainability at this stage is perceived as reducing power consumption, reducing water consumption, and eventually reducing the consumption of raw materials. It's not seen as a more holistic concept that is actually about redesigning products and rethinking products and rethinking the way we organize production to sort this major issue, which is about carbon emissions and the climate change. And the same happens with the digital. What I feel is that we will undergo, unfortunately, but probably, an economic crisis in the turn of this decade, because we'll need to pay for the effort of COVID and we'll need to pay for the readjustment of the industry. There will be significant public investment across across Europe. And what we see is that even in Germany, that we usually look at as the example.
I think that we may have lost Alexandre.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm back. I'm
Yeah.
back. I was saying that even Germany face significant challenges of adaptation, and we see that they are struggling in some areas in catching the train on the electric vehicles, in autonomous driving, and everything that is digital. And coming back to the area of green, the forest is much more than the pulp and paper and a nice landscape. It can be an important tool in the development of inland territories. But for that, we need to create microsystems that foster small economic activities that create jobs, that create opportunities. And these are also very important for the pulp and paper industry, because this is what retains population in the areas where forest is produced. And if we want to manage this resource in an effective way, we need people there. And to have people there, we need to create great environment and living conditions so that they are attracted to be there. Thank you, Gabriel.
Okay, thank you, Alexandre. I think that was nice first round discussion there. I'll follow up on the first question. I'll try to provoke a bit the audience, because of course, now innovation is just different ways to solve a problem and to add value. And of course, you can innovate in any way possible, and to do that, you need to be quite clear what your goals are. And in relation to innovation, we always hear sustainability. And sustainability, like was mentioned here, is a word that has been used for the last 300 years. So the question is more, what is considered to be sustainable or not? And I think that from my perspective, there's been a lot of, I would say, noise around what is sustainable, because for some people, burning biomass to produce energy can be sustainable. For other people, burning biomass to energy is not sustainable. For one thing, some people might look at pulp and paper solid residues and reutilizing them into construction materials and look at that, this is sustainable, this is circular. Some people might look at this is waste, this is just hazardous, that should not be going into new materials. So this paradox in society and even in political realm, whereas being harder and harder to grasp what is sustainable, what is not, and is having that clarity is obviously important to innovation practices. So my question really here is, how can we bridge this paradox, constant paradox? Should we be more clear? How would we be able to make this crystal clear so that innovation can soon follow after that? Maybe Jory, do you want to start with that?
I think big part of the challenge is that we are talking about very complex systems. So forest in itself is already a very complex system, like you were already referring to, Gabriel, and the economies and rural areas are a complex system around it, like Alexandre was saying, and then the whole of the forest-based industries is a very complex system that is indeed this kind of symbiotic industrial ecosystem that is depending on each other and working together. And of course, you can always improve any system, but you need to have system thinking applied to be able to do so. Otherwise, you just think of solving a problem in one area and then you create many more in other areas in the same system. So I think that's where the difficulty of the policy comes into place. Susana showed the picture of the cascading use of wood from the European Commission, and I think it's a nice simplistic idea, but actually in this very complex system, the internal market, if you want to call it like that, for using the materials works perfectly, unless you have then some subsidies that are biasing it to one way or another. And we don't really need to have this kind of one-size-fits micromanagement from Brussels to say how to use the wood best in each of the contexts that are anyhow different. Even in the scale of one country like Portugal, from south to north, it's totally different context, and one size doesn't fit all. So I think that's big challenge we have, and then having these innovations helping us to improve these systems, of course, have to also apply the system thinking. But I think in that, the researchers, the scientists, the innovators are maybe better equipped to think about the systems than the policymakers are typically. And one way to solve that issue is of course to improve communication. So to make people understand this complexity of the system and how it already works, what works well, so that this value is not destroyed, and then to identify what can be still improved, and this better communication about how the forest works, how the forest industries work, how the interrelations work, is also helping to attract maybe those talent that Alexandre was also making a reference to, that we need to have the skills of the future. And then to get the skills of the future, people have to better understand what kind of jobs we can offer, so how attractive we can be. So it's a very complex issue, but I think communication might be the only way of getting out of the problem.
Okay, thanks, Jory. So Francisco, so communication is important, and we know here in Portugal, we're always facing that question when communicating the forest-based industries, and we feel in our skin some of these paradoxes that I just mentioned. And of course, we value our forest-based industry, but in one hand, but in the other hand, some parts of the society pretty much look at us with some suspicion and even forget about the benefits that we can bring to the table. But how do we think that we could be more able to communicate the benefits, the technology benefits, innovation benefits that comes along with our industry? Is there something different that we should be doing? Should we just do and show? Should we do and tell, or tell and do? So what's the approach here?
Definitely, we have to do, we have to tell, and we have to show. That's for sure. The thing is, I think that sometimes we try to communicate too much things at once, and this is also a problem it is not a specific problem of ourselves. As Jory was saying, these are very complex systems, and we are, as humans, we have a very limited capacity of reasoning. And this means that we should focus, okay, after a strategic questioning moment like we are having these last 2-3 years, I think it is time that for us to focus, us like society, beginning from the politicians and ending up in the industries and in the families, we should focus on the next step and avoiding focus too much in the final purposes, because for doing the right thing, let's say, once we know that we need to the carbonization of our society, We need to face the climate change. I think that most of the variables are already known. So let's focus on the path that we have to follow. What do we have to do tomorrow and the day after tomorrow? And if we start doing that, we can also show to the society that we are doing our way. So sometimes we talk too much. Let's say we try to explain and explain and explain, and sometimes we miss showing a little bit more what we are doing, and we should also be aware and should also make clear that there are no perfect solutions. Not even innovation is perfect. There are even what we can call sustainable solutions are not perfect. There are always trade-offs. So we have to know that whatever the path we are going to, we will have negative impacts. There will be a cost, and we have to make choices on the costs that, as a society, we are comfortable to deal with, because we all know that on those processes, the ones that are going to pay the higher costs are the ones that are already paying all the costs along the history. So yes, I think we should, as we say in Portugal, we should look to the length of our legs when we are running or jumping to somewhere. I'm not saying that we should not think on the solutions, on sustainability, on all of that. We should do that, but let's start walking. Let's show the next step. Then within 1 or 2 years, we'll discuss again if we are reaching our goals or not. But if we are every moment focused on our goals, we will never start walking as we should.
Very nice point, Francisco. I think that's a nice follow-up to Susana, and I think Susana has given an example of the cascading value effect of biomass and the apparent paradox, because if we look back in time, maybe the context was different, and the promotion of biomass and wood would be different with, for instance, with this revision of energy directive. The cascading effect is something that is here to stay, and that will obviously affect some of the goals that Francisco was saying, and eventually it will affect the pine value chain in Portugal, namely the energy part of the value chain. So how you see these changes and regulation that probably will be coming forward, and the apparent paradox with the past of the pine industry?
Well, I think that commenting on the sustainability meaning, I think that when the sustainability concept came into the mainstream, people associated with environment, right? But I think now the big step is when companies really realize that sustainability is not about the environment, it's about keeping the business in the long run. And that typically, if you take into account social and environmental factors, that will be better for the business in the long run. And that is not the current culture. And I think that is a huge mindset that needs to be changed. Another thing, of course, we need more integrated policies. So we cannot go on making the energy policy with the economic ministry, and then we have learned that is not the way. So decision makers need to be more articulated, and also the forestry sector needs to reach out and to make that articulation happen. Also, we need more common sense, right? Because taking stamps into a biomass power plant and then having to apply fertilizers was never right. If you think about it, was never a good answer. And but nobody really seems to have think it through. So we need more common sense, basically.
Yes, and again, sometimes these complex systems might be hard to tackle from, again, micromanagement perspective, and of course, if we try to regulate everything to the minimum detail,
yes, we need a more flexible context.
Yeah,
for sure.
So Alexandre, going back to you on this one, and again looking to the eyes of the Portuguese National Agency of Innovation, do you see also these potential paradoxes in terms of sustainability targets, and even to measure sustainability in your innovation projects? Because some of the innovation projects that your agency assess, it also assess the sustainability impacts of the projects on innovation. So is that something that is still of a concern? Is something that can be done on that respect? How do you see from your angle?
I would say that sustainability is, to a certain extent, a philosophy. It's a belief, because people respond to incentives. Even most companies, when they are talking about sustainability, they realize it will benefit them in terms of future competitiveness. Otherwise, they will do exactly the same thing as they did before. There's a sheer example that I like to say, and it's clear. You started charging people 10 cents for every plastic bag in the supermarket, and consumption reduced like hell. So you see people walking around with lots of stuff in their arms, and they spent 100 euros, and a charge of 0.1% was sufficient to change their behavior. So it's actually a perception. It's the change of this perception that can take through the concept of sustainability. It's clear that sustainability can be an approach that improves and optimizes the value chain along the way. Circular economy is not about using byproducts. It's about making more money with the different types of byproducts, creating value for both parties, not just for one. Because if we create only for the user, the producer will be a volunteer, and volunteers are rare. So we need an approach on sustainability that is more targeted to the incentives of people, creating the culture of sustainability, and that will take time. But we also need to find the stick and the carrot approach, especially the carrot approach usually works better, to stimulate the integration of sustainability principles in companies. And this is what companies are doing. Renewable energies became irrelevant, and they exist for a while now. Became relevant because there is an increased awareness by consumers that sustainability is an issue, that we need to reduce carbon emissions. If European Union follow through in the creation of a carbon tax, that changes completely the playing field. And so if there's a carbon tax, this means that companies will be heavily stimulated into changing the way they produce it, to change the way they manage it. And when you are looking for innovations, as I stated before, in this sector, were pretty much concentrated on improving the product, the same product, and improving the process. Not into changing the way you produce in a more broader perspective. It's not about reducing the water. It's about reducing and optimizing everything, thinking of it in a very
So I think we lost Alexandre on the sound here. So let's. So maybe when Alexandre is trying to get
Now,
back.
okay.
Okay, now it's got it. Now you're back.
So my headphones was battery. So in terms of this challenge, I think that when you look at innovation, people are not looking at very different innovation in terms of not only in terms of products, but also in terms of the paradigm of production, how we set up a production, and even in terms of business model. Because even to tackle what Jory was mentioning in terms of the rural economies, you need probably a very different approach in terms of the business model. Business model is integrative, not only of the territories, but of the people, and this is the social area that Susana was mentioning. This is something that comes from the land. You will not have land if you don't have people. You cannot manage forests if you don't have people there to manage it. And so it's a circular in this sense. But what we feel is that there's still a long way to go before companies have a strong commitment to sustainability, a commitment that comes from their own DNA and not to a momentary response to a challenge. But this is a process. This is a process. This also happens to us and in our way of behaving at home. So I would say that from the state and the government point of view, we will keep on investing heavily in the next programming cycle on the reducing the carbon intensity and the energetic intensity of the GDP. And so firms will have huge incentives to not only reduce their footprint on many levels, but also think on how we can conceive a new ecosystem. Sometimes the ecosystem also needs to change, or the way it articulates needs to change. And so let's look for opportunities to create these new ecosystems and to stimulate a new DNA of the value chain. It's you are still keeping the assets and the major forces that you have, but thinking of it in a different way on how we can optimize the response and the system and multiply the income sources of different companies. I would say that we will be heading towards, and especially in the circular economy, I truly believe this, we will be heading towards an economy that needs to be multi-income source and not one only income source in order to support all these small activities and actually have a system that is founded on economic incentives. We have a saying in Portugal, and since Jory is coming to Portugal many times, we can share with him that the hell is full of good intents. So people need to be interested. This is about human psychology. Economy is about people, and you can only mobilize people if they're interested into. And this is coming back to the plastic bags in the supermarket. 10 cents made a huge difference, and it's 10 cents. And people spend much more in the supermarket, and they rather look a little bit strange trying to carry everything in their arms than to pay 10 cents that they would not pick from the ground if they left the coin fell from their hand. Thank you.
Good, Elshan. So I think that we're a bit short on time, but I will probably launch a last round, quickly a lunch round. I think that we talk about carrot, and I think the carrot is also important, and we've gone into trends, policies, regulations, and I think one important aspect of innovation is also the financing, and we all know that there's a lot of funds being made available by public sources in the next years with next gen funds and Horizon Europe. And I remember a very nice quote from Miss von der Leyen when she mentioned that here in Europe we're very good at making science with money, but we're not very good at making money with science. So my question really here is, do we believe that the next years of investing and financing on innovation will be the most effective ones in general, and of course looking at forest-based industry in particular? Jory, do you want to have your views on that?
Well, my predecessor a long time ago in CEPI was a very smart Portuguese lady, Teresa Presas. I don't know if you know her, but she was identifying this problem of needing to have the finance for innovation in our sector. So she set up together with other actors in the forest-based industries this forest-based technology platform that has the key function in identifying the research needs, the innovation needs, and then making sure that the public funding for innovation is also matching these needs that we have. And I think that is something that when I mentioned in the beginning that I'm inspired by having basically daily news about innovation in our sector. It's now the fruit of her work so long ago. And I think that's part of the problem that how can we have a good management for financing innovation and research, knowing that it will take a long time before we see the results and the society might have moved on meanwhile. So we are always sort of long time behind of what is the actual need of the society where the society is moving. But still, of course, I do believe that this funding for innovation and research is vital and important. But maybe there are ways of then also making money with this innovation or money with the science. And then I think we can have examples of that in some other continents. So maybe we don't have to ask one or the other, but to say how can we have both? So have the money for the science, but then also making sure that the science is paying back and financing something in the society, or you have these ideas of like Mrs. Masukato that you could have the investment of the society that is then later on asked to have back. So I think there are many opportunities in solving that issue as well. But finding the carrot, I think it's good, and I think mostly the businesses have the carrot internally. So Alexandre mentioned the need to reduce water use. Well, we need water for two purposes. One is in the process, and the other one is in the energy generation, but both are linked to the energy. So there is already a huge link to the energy cost in that, and plus we are of course paying energy for pumping all that water. So if we could, we would make paper without water, because we have clear incentive in reducing our energy cost by having less water. And this is why we really have this impressive result of energy reduction that Francisco showed already in the beginning. We are very much an industry that is based on circularity, on biomimicry. So we work in a way that nature would work if they were in our place. And then in that, I don't think nature works with austerity. It works actually with generosity, with plentiful of things. But the key is that nothing is wasted. And then I think that's the way we should continue working in our sector as well, and then not having this 10 eurocent tax on something to avoid something happening. Maybe for consumers, that's the first incentive, but for industries, typically the incentive is inherent there in the business, in the profitability.
Good. So Francisco, also quickly, financing-wise, pulp and paper companies in Portugal, are they well capitalized in one hand? And the other hand, are the organizations ready for this avalanche of innovation funds coming from Europe? You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. First of all, I completely agree what Jory has just said. Secondly, our companies in Portugal from paper and pulp industry, they are prepared. They are fully prepared. They are working on, as I said, on the innovation processes, and they are. I'm not saying waiting. They are digging on finding out the financial solutions that can keep them on track. Our industry is normally known, especially here in Portugal, is known as a rich industry, pulp and paper, because normally people look at the cash flow. But what I normally say is don't pay so much attention on the cash flow. Look to the investment that our industries today in Portugal do need to improve all the processes that we are talking about. That's where our focus should be put on. Okay, so just two final notes, very briefly. One, as Alexandre said, the stimulation is very effective. I do agree, but just be careful because overstimulation normally kill the patient. Heartbreaks are normally can be provoked by overstimulation. And the second thing is that it is true that companies take time to incorporate in their DNA the environment focus. That is true because our companies, they are in the market, they have to generate value. And one lack we have in our economies, at least in Portugal, it is very, very visible, as someone said before, is that we have a lack of public payments on the public goods that we are asking the companies to produce. There are market failures over there, and it is important that the public, the government, find out how to pay for those public goods that are now being asked the companies to actively produce. So what until now was seen as a constraint on the production function is now asked to be an objective of our activity, and it is okay. The thing is that we have to find out where is the market value and where is the money, who is going to pay for. As someone said, there is no public money. Okay, so the money is coming from households. We have to balance that, and we have to be aware of those realities, not to have so much bad surprises in the end.
Okay, thank you, Francisco. So Susana, same question to you. And the pine sector in Portugal, again, very asymmetrical in terms of dimension. Are they companies ready?
I prefer the term diverse rather than
Diverse.
asymmetrical, because the word asymmetrical tends to be something with something wrong.
Let's go with diverse.
Yes. So this diversity means that some companies are ready, and in fact, I see some companies more willing to invest in innovation, but of course, others are clearly still are not ready, or even they are not able to make this investment. I would like to testify about the question of making money with research. That since I've joined Centro PINUS, lately I see much more researchers reaching out to economic agents to design their projects and to invite us to follow up their projects. And I think this has to do with the way the fundings are designed, because they made them do this. And I think this can lead to bridging the economy and research.
Okay, so final but not least, Alexandre, coming from the National Agency of Innovation, is your organization ready to deploy all the goods and support all the companies that are looking for all these funds? Because it's a challenge as well.
I would say that the state is never ready. Being completely blunt, the state is never ready. We are full of good intents, but we have two issues that I think are complicated. The first one is obvious, but that's not even the most important one, which is that we have severe limitation of resources in terms of the management. The disproportion between the amount of money we manage and the size of the teams is huge. But that's not the most relevant one. The most relevant one is that we have a policy that believes that optimum control is maximum control. This means create a heavy burden of bureaucracy and control to try to prevent any type of misdeed from the promoter. And so instead of creating a system that is flexible and favors economic activity and the normal development of processes, and then if something goes wrong, introduce real accountability, we prefer a police system that is controlling every little bit of action that companies are making. And this actually, in the attempt of creating a very honest policy instrument, a very honest management system, you actually violate the sheer principles underlying the creation of the instrument itself. I will provide you an example. The time it takes to evaluate applications and the time it takes for companies to receive the first money is way too long, is way too complex. The sequentiality between instruments, supporting R&D, but then creating an instrument that tags along when you're trying to create value out of science, instead of having a valley in the middle and then maybe 6 months later having that opportunity. That's not possible, not because the state is incompetent, but the state is afraid. And the lack of, or the inability to assume responsibility, to be bold and audacious and courageous that mistakes will be made, assuming that mistakes will be made is much better than trying to prevent any type of mistake. But when you do this, you're actually constraining the whole system. And so you never solve, in the forest case, the problems of property, the problems of the management of fires in the summer. You don't solve it because you go after the criminals instead of trying to find a system, setting up a system that then punishes the criminals. This police logic that is in the public system is actually very damaging on the effectiveness of public policies and public instruments. Otherwise, the state is ready. The state does commit. Portugal makes very good strategies and has a good track record in the implementation of innovation policy. We took a jump. Jory does not know us probably from then, but for most of you, if you go back 20 years, human capital levels were very low. People speaking in a meeting like today in English, it will be a problem. And we have come a long way. We need to facilitate our lives and assume that sometimes it will go wrong. I usually say that the same happens to us in venture capital, and concluding my comment, going back to financing. The pulp and paper does not need this type of financing, at least this side, because those are large companies, don't need venture capital. Not in this sense. Maybe they can create a landscape or an ecosystem to support startups and new bioproducts related to forest. And maybe that could be interesting also because we have a very significant tax incentive for these companies to deduct on their income tax and create this kind of innovation stimulating ecosystem. But going back to finance, what we see in the venture capital approach in Portugal is a cautious approach. And again, because the state has created a wholesaler system that injects money in retailers to boost the venture capital funds, we then implement a logic that comes from the banks. Let's look for safe investments. We should be looking at burning money and assuming that in some cases we'll be burning money. But the one we hit, we will hit strongly. But this is a perspective that, like sustainability, is about changing the culture of how we do things. Making it wrong, it's better to do wrong than not to do it at all. Thank you.
Okay, and I think that was a nice closing off comment for our session. And again, I'll thank you all of the participants that were online to wait until the beginning of the session and have gone with us until now. I'll thank all my panel colleagues. So Jory, Francisco, Susana, Alexandre, thanks a lot for very nice presentations and a very nice discussion. I think it was very lively and interesting discussion, and I think that for the people that have not been able to join, they'll be able to watch the session that we have recorded. Just to finalize this, to remember you that tomorrow we'll have another session, another innovation talk. Hopefully this at 4 p.m. Portuguese time, starting out, but focusing now on the wood products sector, which is also a very interesting one, and the one that is kind of a sister sector for the pulp and paper. So again, thank you all, and hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
See ya. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.